MKUltra is not the name of a new James Bond movie. It is, or rather was, the code word for a secret CIA project, which took place between 1953 and 1964, in which unsuspecting people were used in mind control experiments that left them emotionally crippled for life. MKUltra consisted of more than 130 research programs, which took place in prisons, hospitals, and universities all across the United States. This was the introduction to a portion of an episode of 60 Minutes and was hosted and narrated by the now-deceased American journalist Ed Bradley. After months and months of requests and more months of delays, the video that many of you have been waiting for is here. I promised you that I would take a deeper dive into Project MKUltra and into further projects of mind control and projects designed by the government to control the public eye. However, there have been many reasons as to why I was hesitant to make this video, let alone the next two that will follow this one. What I will discuss in this 3-part series of videos extends far beyond the scope of programs like MKUltra and dives into very deep and complex questions, such as the idea of free will and the issue of privacy on a level never seen before. Rightly so, this video has been a long time coming and will serve as the perfect tie-in to the rest of what will come throughout this series. This is Mind Control and the Pursuit of Power, Part 1. To gain a better understanding of why MKUltra is important in today's world, aside from being the inspiration for the award-winning and critically acclaimed Netflix series Stranger Things, we need to take a brief dive into the history of the project. At the time, the United States government feared that the Soviet Union, China, and North Korean government agents were using mind control to brainwash American prisoners of war in Korea. As a result, then director of the CIA, Alan Dulles, approved Project MKUltra and set it into motion in 1953. Due to paranoia and rumors along spy chains that the Soviet Union could gain control over a new psychoactive drug known now to the public as LSD, the United States sent 2 spies over to Basel, Switzerland, to buy out every known drop of LSD in existence at the time. What they ended up purchasing was 10 grams of LSD-25, which is enough LSD to dose over half of the American population. Their hope was to utilize the new drug to conduct mind control experiments in what would later be known as Operation Midnight Climax. The earliest experiments conducted in this project were simple and considered highly unethical by today's research standards. The first experiments with LSD were headed by chemist and poison expert Sidney Gottlieb. Operation Midnight Climax was conducted with the aid of hired prostitutes who would lure unsuspecting men into CIA safe houses, where they would be drugged while Gottlieb and other CIA agents would drink cocktails from behind a 2-way mirror. Recording devices disguised as electrical outlets were hidden within the rooms to document the experiments further. There was little government oversight and little concern for the people who were subjected to these experiments. Ken Kesey, author of the 1962 novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, was one of the voluntary participants of the MKUltra experiments, who later promoted LSD-fueled parties that were later referred to as acid tests. These types of parties were often paired with psychedelic visuals and music, and are largely contributed to having given rise to the 1960s psychedelic drug scene. Other notable people such as the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski and Boston mobster James Joseph Bolger reportedly volunteered for the experiments involved in MKUltra. After the rise of the hippie culture that would come to define a generation of rebels who stood against the government, the methods by which the initial tests were conducted came to light within the CIA and brought the LSD experiments of MKUltra to an end. Nearly a decade later, in 1974, New York Times journalist Seymour Hersh published his report documenting how the CIA had conducted non-consensual drug experiments and had set up illegal spying operations on American citizens. His report detailed the hoops that he had to travel through to bring the long-suppressed details of Project MKUltra to light. In 1975, President Ford launched the President's Commission on CIA Activities and launched an investigation led by Vice President Nelson Rockefeller and would later be referred to as the Rockefeller Commission. The Church Committee was formed in the same year and was helmed by Idaho Senator Frank Church and was intended to investigate the abuses of federal intelligence agencies during and after the resignation of former President Richard Nixon. What the Church Committee came across were plots to assassinate foreign leaders, as well as thousands of documents related to Project MKUltra. With these new revelations that had been finally made known to the public, President Ford passed an executive order in 1976 that prohibited, and I quote, experimentation with drugs on human subjects except with the informed consent in writing and witnessed by a disinterested party of each such human subject. Among LSD, other drugs such as heroin, methamphetamine, barbiturates, and MDMA were used in experiments on people to test the power of suggestion and how much control they could have over people. The original goal was to utilize these drugs to manipulate people by drugging them into a trained, zombie-like state where they would go in, commit some form of prepared act, and after their job was completed, they would wake up the next day and remember nothing that had happened. While LSD did nothing more for the CIA other than serve as the recreational drug of choice for many of the people who spoke out in rejection of the federal government during the 60s, there were other unethical experiments that took place between the years of 1953 and 1963 that were done in the pursuit of understanding how to control the human mind. In spite of the CIA having destroyed countless numbers of documents related to MKUltra, more information on the project has recently been declassified and released to the public. Just this past December, more documents were declassified and documented experiments conducted on 6 dogs where they had mind control devices surgically implanted into their skulls and attached to their brains in order to test the possibility of controlling someone's mind through a machine. The experiments have been mostly forgotten about by the public eye, save for those who are fans of Stranger Things and are aware of where the inspiration for this show came from. Most of us tend to forget basic things from time to time, but the reason courses like history are still mandated in public schools is because we, as the public, generally should know of the changes and events that led us to our current day, for better or for worse. The experiments of MKUltra were largely a failure, but were the inspiration for a number of other experiments that would follow and have inspired some future experiments, some of which are still going on to this very day. For if you cannot control the minds of those you deem a threat or see as a potential ally, then you can try to control the environment in which they live and conduct themselves. Or perhaps you could control the market by which they buy and sell goods. Or perhaps you could control the information and news being shared to these people and create your own narrative. Or perhaps you could do all of that and more. While some people would rather forget about or diminish the significance of history, others will purposefully hide the intentions and acts led by certain groups throughout history, and may still hide their true intentions in plain sight.
It's all part of the Chinese government's new social credit system.
What you do, say, and even think is being monitored and marked against you.
This chilling image is just a glimpse into the human rights abuses happening in China right now. Satellite shots are reportedly re-education centers, although Chinese officials insist they are vocational education and employment training centers.
I find it very frightening, the fact that technology has now made the dystopian novels of the 20th century seem almost quaint because the level of surveillance is so great and very inconsistent with our own views and our own society.
Jaywalking, smoking, too many video games, that is not good news for the coolest kid in 7th grade.